automatically recording.
Okay, cool. So now we wait for that to turn on. Yay!
Oh, there we go.
Yay! Awesome! Okay, so I think that we got everything all set up. Can everyone hear me first off? And Steven's helping me. You can kind of see his little shirt right here. Everyone hear me? Because I think I got all the audio set up. So, yay! It says hello, hi. Yay!
And
yes!
Miguel.
Awesome! Okay, cool. So today I decided that I was going to do a live stream because I wasn't able to I'm currently working on the 100,000 special video. I'm working on that right now, and I'm really being a perfectionist about that. So that should be coming out next week, and that's taking a little bit longer than what I thought. So I thought today let's do a live stream where you can kind of just sit and talk to me. I have my coffee here, my little bunny mug. So we can just sit and chat, and so anyway, that is kind of what we're going to be doing. Now, in the comments, go ahead and tell me kind of where you're from so I can get an idea of like where you're coming from and where you're watching. So that would be really cool to see. And let's go ahead and jump into this. I am going to talk to you guys, but I thought as we're kind of revving up, I would just kind of get to know you guys and also talk about some of my favorite supplies for this particular stream. Aw, someone said that you are my inspiration. Tan ZC, I think is it? Aw, that's so sweet. It makes me happy. Awesome. So we got Malaysia, Netherlands, India, Tennessee, Philippines, Texas. Wow, we're all over the place. Yay! I love the internet for that reason. I love that we can just connect with each other. I would never be able to meet any of you if we didn't have the internet. So that is just so cool. Got the Philippines again, Northern Arizona, Brazil, Costa Rica, Texas, Missouri. That's cool. Canada, Germany. Awesome. So let's go ahead and kind of jump in. I'm going to try and make this live stream about 20 minutes. And if we go a little bit over, no big deal, but I think that's a good time for kind of a live stream. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about some of my favorite supplies, and then if you have questions, please make sure to leave them in the chat, and my husband will kind of direct me to them. So I wanted to talk about my favorite supplies for April 2018. They have changed a lot. The last time I did a live stream, I did my favorite supplies, and I thought this would be a good topic. So the first supply that I want to talk about is basically what we did for the last video, which is the watercolor palette. And I wanted to kind of update you on my thoughts on it because I told you I would do that. So here's the watercolor palette that I showed in that previous video, and it's that metal tin. And I still really like it. I've been playing around with it. I actually washed it all out again. And you can see I took some of the paints out. I've kind of limited my palette a little bit more. Now I have about 34 paints in here now. But what's really cool is, and I thought I would share this with you, I just put my little brush. This is one of my favorite brushes, which is a Grumbacher size 6. I've had this for a really long time. You can see I've taped it. Like some of the stuff has actually started to break. I think I've had this for about 4 to 5 years now. This particular brush, I still really love it. I still use it all the time. So I just stuck that. I took all the little pans out of this row and I stuck that one in there. Now, you can see that I've it's blank again. I've been painting on it and then kind of washing it out because sometimes I like to start with a clean palette, especially when I'm working on courses, which I've been doing in kind of the background. I like to start with the most purest of colors so that I can give you a really good gauge of how I'm mixing my colors and putting them together. So I'm constantly cleaning my palette. I know a lot of artists don't do that. They just leave their colors on their palette. That's kind of the reason why I do that. But I will say this, after cleaning the palette, I've noticed that the metal has started to bead again. And so what I just did is I have redone the toothpaste again, and it fixes the problem. So if you're allowing your paints to kind of stay in the palette, it's not going to be an issue because basically the paints are just going to layer on top of each other and you'll still get that pooling. But if you're washing it and then redoing it, I've noticed that some of the areas are still pooling and some of them are not. If you see Teddy, she's moving around in the background. So I wanted to update you on that particular thing. And let's see.
There's a lot of questions.
We got some questions. So let's answer some questions.
Let me go back up here.
I think it started...
Well, this one, we can get into this later.
Let's see.
We'll just stick on the ones that relate to this, I think.
Okay, there was one about the palette. Have I ever tried gouache? Yes, I have. I actually took a class on gouache, and I really like gouache, personally. I'm not great at it. That's why I don't do it a lot on my channel. But basically, gouache is just very opaque watercolor, and it's kind of similar to acrylic in that it's going to layer and it's going to build up on itself. But the difference with acrylic and gouache is with acrylic, once it dries, you're not going to be able to lift that color or reblend it. It's just there. It's stuck. Gouache, however, similar to watercolor, is going to lift back up and you're going to be able to blend it. And so it acts a lot like watercolor, but how it looks and how it paints is very similar to acrylic. I have a couple of Winsor & Newton gouache paints. I would love to get more. I've heard Holbein is a really good brand for gouache. If you really want to know more about gouache, Minnie Smalls has a great series on that. So go and check her out. She pretty much just totally has got that market, in my opinion, cornered. She's really great at it. So check her out if you want to know more about gouache. I only know a little bit. I only took like one class, and in my opinion, I wasn't that good at it. But that's not a big deal because I'm learning. All right.
Question says about palettes.
Question, I got the Master Touch palette, 33 wells. My paint always dries too fast. Why do you think that has happened? All right, so is it drying inside? I have two questions. First off, does it have a lid to that palette? And then secondly, is it drying when you're storing it, or is it drying as you're working in it? I will say for me, even with this particular palette, when you're working in porcelain, and this actually is a good kind of transition. I'll pull some of my porcelain palettes out that I really like and kind of get into this. All right, so the very first thing that I want to say is no matter what type of palette you have, whether it be a porcelain, these are little tasting dishes that I actually got from World Market. And this is a small little palette. You've probably seen a lot of artists use this. This is porcelain. And then this, of course, is my metal palette. My metal palette has a lid. So, since it has a lid, my paints don't really cake up and dry up in it as well. I've noticed I used it and then a couple of hours later, I used it one night and then I used it the next morning, and my paints, since I had the lid, were still wet inside of it, which is really nice. But if you leave your watercolors out in the open, this is what happens. This is a porcelain palette. It's really nice. Porcelain palettes are my favorite. But your paints start to break apart. So for the first part of that question, if your watercolors are out in the open air and you're not using them a lot, they're going to break apart and they're going to just kind of do this weird thing, if you can see it. I don't want it to fall out, but it's kind of like cakey and chalky and falling apart. The next part of that question is, what if you're working in it and your paints are drying as you're working in it? That is always a problem. I don't know if the Master's Touch is plastic or metal. I personally don't really like Master's Touch. Their other supplies, I've never used their palette, but some of their other supplies I feel like aren't the highest of quality for the amount of price that you pay, I will say. But that being said, it is a problem when you're working and your paints are drying as you're working. That's a very common problem. So what you need to do is, as you're working, you're going to need to kind of keep adding paint and water to your palette and continually be mixing it. So a lot of times when I'm painting an illustration, I'll mix up a huge amount of paint. Don't be stingy when you're mixing your colors, because it's easier to work with a larger amount of color and have some extra in your palette for later use than mixing up too little and then having to recreate that color, which is extremely hard. So what I typically do when I am working in my palette is I'll be working with a color. I'll usually fill up about half of an area if I'm working a very large area of color. And then as I'm going, usually within let's give it a time limit. After about 2 to 3 minutes, I usually notice that my color is starting to dry up. So I'll add more water, but then I'll add more paint to it as well, which will change your color a little bit. But what I'm trying to do is keep that color continually being vibrant and wet in my palette. Now, if you want the exact same color in a large particular wash, porcelain is the way to go. These little things are only $12. And this particular palette right here was $18. So the way I see it is, if you're working really large washes, you need to get a porcelain palette because your paint is going to stay more active. I probably, time-wise, if I fill up this well, I usually fill it up. If I'm doing a really large wash, I'll fill it up halfway with the color, and then that color will stay active and I won't have to add more paint to it. I won't have to recreate that color as I'm painting. That color will stay active for 10 to 15 minutes or longer, depending on the environment that I'm in. So if there's a lot of moisture in the air, the paint will actually last longer. If it's a very dry, usually in the summer, my paints will also dry faster because it's more of an arid environment compared to the spring and the fall. We get a lot of rain here, so there's actually a lot of moisture. So I hope that's a pretty long-winded answer, but I hope that answered those. What pencil do I use to sketch out my drawings? All right, usually in my videos, I show a really nice fancy pencil, and I can't remember the brand, but I'm going to tell you this. I do that because I want the visual to look really nice. It's an awesome pencil, but that pencil is I think $15. It's a really expensive pencil, and the lead is replaceable, but then the lead is really expensive. So usually what I end up doing is just using a very basic mechanical pencil, and kind of my cheat for it is when I start, I will usually break the lead to create a really nice sharp point, because as you're working with these types of mechanical pencils, this is just a basic supply pencil, they get dull on the end, and that's when you start getting kind of that weird thicker line. So what I usually do is I'll take one of my sketchbooks. This is just a mixed media. This is one of my favorite sketchbooks. It's a Strathmore mixed media. And what I'll actually do before I even start, and I usually have a page at the back or the front where I do this because I don't want to do it on every page, but I'll actually take the pencil and I'll pop it. And what it does is it creates a nice sharp edge again. It's weird. I've done that since I was little and it works for me. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on your pencils unless you really, really want to get more of a professional style pencil. I have in one of my videos one of the pencil, like the brand, but I can't remember what it is. So on my website, I think I'll put the exact brand of the professional one, but don't spend your money on pencils, in my opinion. I would rather spend my money on my paints and my palette and my paper. Those are the three things that if I'm going to spend my money on it, I'm going to spend it on my palette, my paint, and my paper. Those three things, in my opinion, really make or break a watercolor painting. And I've heard so many artists say the exact same thing. What are the actual best paints if you want clean paints, not granular? Okay. This is a really, really good question. When you are, first off, let me put my little speech out there. I have tons of different brands of paints, and I am constantly on the lookout for the best paints for a particular color. This is the reason why I get a lot of questions of, hey, if you're using like a lemon yellow, and I have this particular brand. I actually had someone this week ask me this. They were taking one of my courses and they said, I have koi paints and I have a lemon yellow in here. Is this the same as your schminky lemon yellow? It's cadmium lemon yellow. And I can't answer that question because first off, I've never used koi paints. I've only used really schminky, Holbein, Winsor & Newton, and Daniel Smith. Those are the only 4 brands that I've really used. And I don't have all the colors. I can't afford all of the colors for all of those brands. But the way I like to think of watercolor brands is kind of thinking of fast food restaurants. So when you go to McDonald's and you get a burger, that burger is completely different from Burger King or In-N-Out or Wendy's, or think of any, like even like a mom and pop hamburger store. Those hamburgers are all different, but yet they're basically all the same. That's the way I view watercolor paint brands. Daniel Smith will have a very different mixture and a very different kind of take of how they grind and how they put those colors together compared to Schminky or compared to Winsor & Newton or even Holbein or Koi. List goes on and on. So this is what I always recommend is if you can, try your colors out, play around with them. Now, that being said, I know a lot of you can't afford to just go and buy paints and try them out. So how can you make an educated guess about the particular brand so you don't get this granulation? The way you do that is by looking at the site. Usually the brand has a list of colors and they'll say, is this opaque? Is this transparent? Is this granulating? And they will actually tell you exactly what it is. And let me get something. I just thought of something real quick. I got a dot chart. Love these things. This is one of my other favorite supplies. Let me open it. Sorry if it's loud. Okay, so this is a Daniel Smith dot chart, and basically what it is this is their 250 dot chart. These are all the particular paints that they recommend. Now, this is only $22, and basically they have little dots of color, so you can play around with the different colors that they offer. So that's one really good way to check out if they're granulating. But this is one reason why I love Daniel Smith. They have really got it together. Let's see. Here it is. For each paint color, they will tell you, is this granulating? No, yes, and varying degrees. It also tells you transparency. Is this transparent, semi-transparent? And these are kind of the icons. And so you can kind of see for Phthalo Yellow Green, it has, this is a transparent paint, you can see from the thing, And is it granulating? No. So that would be a really nice color to get a non-granulating color. Now, when we're talking about transparent and opaque, I always have to keep in mind when a paint is transparent, that means it's usually going to dry a lot lighter than an opaque paint would or a semi-opaque. So I have a Scarlet Lake inside of my palette, which is right here. And this is a Winsor Newton Scarlet Lake. This is a very transparent color. I love mixing this color with very opaque colors, and because it makes a smooth transition. So one thing that I did with a Fox Force is I mixed Scarlet Lake with the Cadmium Orange, and they make a really nice combo. Cadmium Red, though, is more of a opaque color. They still make a really great color combo, and I recommend it if you can't afford Scarlet Lake. You can use Cadmium Red, but be aware you're probably not going to want to use as much paint as you would with Scarlet Lake, because since Scarlet Lake is transparent, you're going to need to add more color to get more of that vibrant in your mixture. So I hope that answers that particular question. That was a really great question. Oh, probably another thing I should say is when I am looking for paints, I'm typically looking, I can tell you this right now, I don't like granulating. I like really smooth transitions when I'm painting, and I don't like granulating paints. I have some paints that are granulating, but not a whole lot. And usually the paints that are granulating, I choose them because I really like the color that they offer. That being said, I would say I usually kind of stick with paints that are completely transparent, or I get paints that are actually opaque. The reason why I do that, I don't usually get paints that are semi-opaque. And the reason why is because I feel like if I'm working with a completely transparent color or a completely opaque color, I know exactly how those paints are going to act, and I know how they're going to mix. So that's kind of a little key for that particular thing. Hopefully that helps. All right, hey Carrie, can you explain more about starting with a limited palette as a good idea? All right, let me think. Great question, Tracy. Oh, I wish I had my color wheel. I don't think I have it, because that would be the best way to explain that. All right, when I am choosing a limited palette, think about having a color wheel in front of you. When I'm choosing a limited palette, I try to choose harmonious colors, meaning if I'm choosing a red, I want to use orange, I want to use yellow, and I want to use pink. And then a couple of times I will choose an opposite color. So with the Fox painting, you can see, I'll pull it down so you can get an idea. I used a limited palette on the Fox painting, which a lot of you liked. And you can see this is all blues, and then I have my reds and yellows and oranges. So I knew I wanted my focus to be my reds and orange and yellow, but I wanted a contrasting color that would really make that Fox pop out. So I chose to work with just blues. There's no purples in here. This is just blues. So for this particular palette, the colors that I used were Scarlet Lake, I used Cadmium Lemon Yellow, and I used Cadmium Orange, and I used Winsor Blue, Phthalo Blue, I'm sure I'm not saying that name right, and Manganese Blue. Those are all blues. They're all very close to each other on the color wheel. And so that's kind of where I come kind of getting an idea for a limited palette. Usually what I start with is I figure out what is the main thing that I want to pop in this painting. For this, it was the Fox. And then I will usually choose a color that's opposite on the color wheel that I feel like would really pop it. So that is a contrasting color. So when you're looking at your color wheel, you'll see orange. I chose orange as my main because I knew my reds and my yellows would mix more into an orange. The opposite color on the color wheel is blue. So I chose, it kind of starts looking like a little triangle. It's like like that. That's the type of palette. I can't remember the name of it, but that's kind of how I choose my limited palettes. Now, sometimes I break those rules. I mean, art, you're meant to break rules. So for the chameleon painting, this is actually one that I didn't show in the video. I have a more simplified one, but I totally broke that. I just did rainbow. So sometimes it's good to follow a limited palette, especially if you don't understand your colors, you don't understand how they mix together. Work with a limited palette, figure out what those paints actually do with one another, how they mix. Do they create some paints even though they're not granulating? This is going back to that granulating question. Some paints, even though they aren't granulating paints, when you mix them together, because of the properties that are inside those paints, they will create a granulating mixture. So that is something that I'm always on kind of the lookout for. I have color charts right here. I'm going to go right past you, Stephen. I am an obsessive nerd when it comes to this. But this is me testing out all of the colors and how they mix together. These are just my warms, I should say, from this particular palette. And what I'm trying to do before I get into painting an illustration, because I have an illustration coming up where I want to use a lot of colors in it. It's actually going to be for the 100K video. I want to use a lot of colors, but I want to be careful because some colors, when they mix together, they will create a granulating effect. I don't personally like that. So I'm constantly testing out my colors to just make sure that those two colors, when they're mixed together, don't create a granulating kind of feel. They're more smooth and transparent. So this is something that I do every once in a while to refresh what do these paints actually do on the paper. So how do you refresh pre-made watercolor pans? I personally don't like pre-made watercolor pan paints. I like tube paint, and the reason is because when using pan paints, especially if they're student grade pan paints, it is very difficult to get super bright colors from those pan sets. I absolutely love Winsor, but I will never buy the Winsor Cotman pan paints. They are horrible, in my opinion, for getting super bright colors. Okay, so that being said, first off, if you're trying to wet pan paints necessarily that are an artist grade, basically what I will tend to do is take a spray water bottle and just do a slight mist over the whole entire pan palette. And I will do this too with my tube paint. So if I have student grade paints, and I actually do, in here I have Winsor & Newton Cotman student grade paints. I have a couple. I have turquoise. I really like their turquoise, and I really like their mauve. Their mauve is one of my favorite colors. Usually what I do is I will have a little bit in the pan, so if I'm doing something and I want just that color really quick, I'll just squirt some water over it, and it will basically refresh that paint and allow me to use it. But just be aware that color is going to be lighter than if you were using it straight from the tube. So if I know I'm going to be using a lot of that student grade color, what I'm going to do is actually put a little bit of the tube paint in beside the palette. I'm going to wet the palette first, then put a little bit of the tube paint on top, mix it with the paint that's already in there, and make a more vibrant color. So I hope that kind of helps. The main thing that I do with my pans is I will mist over them with a spray bottle. And I have one of those, you don't have to buy a super expensive spray bottle. I have an old spray bottle that used to have glasses cleaner in it. And basically what I did is I just took the label off and I cleaned it out thoroughly, and I just used that. So basically a free little water bottle from Old Stuff. What?
Answered that already.
Yeah, I already answered that. Let's see. I'm going to cut this off pretty soon because I think we've talked a good amount about watercolor palettes. Another thing that I do want to say, talking about watercolor palettes and watercolor paper, those are the two things, and watercolor paint, three things that I feel like are the most important. With watercolor paper, I know a lot of you, Arches is my ultimate favorite. That is the brand that I love the most. But I know a lot of you can't afford it because it's really expensive. So I have come across a new brand that actually one of you recommended to me. And it's called Bee Paper. This is the this is what was on the journal. So it's Creative Bee Paper. And for a student grade paper, I absolutely love this paper. It acts very similar to Arches, but it can't take as much water abuse as Arches. So here is an example to kind of give you an idea. This is me playing around with colors inside of a Bee Paper journal. So you can kind of see the difference. This is on Arches paper, and this particular one is on the student grade Bee Paper. Now, I sometimes, basically what I do is I will play around with my colors in a student grade paper, and then I will take my favorites and put them on Arches, because you can definitely see a difference in how these two paints look. And I mainly work on Arches for my big illustrations, so I want to see how those paints are working and know how they work. That being said, these particular journals, they kind of look like this on the front. You can get them on Amazon. This one was like $12 for 30 sheets of watercolor paper. Really good deal. I absolutely love this particular kind of Bee paper. That being said, there are also sheets of Bee paper. I bought these as well. If I had a choice, I will always buy this particular kind. And the reason is because even though these are the loose sheets and they're made with cotton, that's why they're a little bit different. Both of these are made with cotton instead of kind of recycled pressed together paper, kind of like Canson or Strathmore. For their student grade paper, they will use that. But the reason why I don't like these as much is because they are thinner than the sketchbooks. So the sketchbook paper is a lot thicker, and since it's thicker, it will take more water abuse. So as a beginner, if you are painting with watercolor student grade paper, go for this. A lot of beginners, they make mistakes. Guess what? As professionals, we make mistakes, and it's not a big deal. But it's really nice to have a student grade paper that can take abuse and take you making mistakes, and your illustration isn't completely devastated after you make a mistake and you have to start all over again. It's nice to be able to have a paper that is reliable and can take that water abuse. So that is my take on student grade watercolor paper.
Somebody was asking what was good brushes for beginners.
What is a good brush for beginners? That's hard for me to answer because
I
do have I wonder if you're talking about brands or if you're talking about the shape of the brush. Brands, I will say, I have mainly kind of stuck with the Grumbacher, which is an artist grade brush. That being said, these brushes right here, almost all of them are cheap student grade brushes that I've had since high school. So sometimes I will pull these particular ones out. The main thing that you're looking for when you're looking at student grade brushes, and just kind of be aware of this, student grade brushes are not as nice quality, of course, as an artist grade brush. But the main thing that you're looking for when you're looking at a student grade brush is, for me, I always like to use round brushes or I use flat brushes. So this is actually a master's touch. I didn't like this particular brush. I will still probably use this because I bought it, but the hairs will come out of it every once in a while when I'm painting, which is annoying because it will leave little streaks. I actually used this for the fox painting, and you can see these little hair streaks because the hair was actually coming out of it while I was painting the illustration. I'll still use this because I bought it and I want to get my money out of it, but I'm only going to use this when I don't really care what the illustration looks like at the end. But that being said, when you're looking at student grade paints, if you can, some of them you can't because they're packaged. The first thing that you kind of want to see is, can it come to a point? So this is a student grade brush, and this is an old brand. I would recommend this brand, but they're probably out of business. I've had this since high school. So the first thing I want to do is make sure, does it come to a nice point if it's a round brush? And another thing I want to see is, you don't want to do this in the store too rough, but just kind of pull on it. And this particular one, if I pull on it, I can get little hairs out of it. That means it's not a good brush. The glue at the bottom of it is not pulling it out. Now, this one I couldn't really test in the store because it was locked in a plastic wrap, which sometimes student grade brands will do that because they don't want you to test the brush and kind of figure that out. But the main things that you want to do is just make sure, does it have a nice point, and are the hairs coming out as you're just like slowly, don't pull on it because that's never good to do with a brush. But if you're just like trying to get a nice point, a lot of times with my student grade brushes or my artist grade brushes, after I'm done, I will try and just pull the hairs together and make a really nice point. If you're doing that in the store and hairs are coming out, that's not a good brush. So I hope that kind of answers your question for that. Anything else? And then one more question, and then we will end because this has been a lengthy live stream.
Drink some water.
She was like, drink some water. Let me think. Let me look at my list. I had a couple of other like supplies that I really, really like. Talked about that. Oh, I want to talk about this because a lot of you have actually been asking, what type of white do I use when I'm painting little dots or I'm painting highlights? I use this particular brand. It's Copic Opaque White. Actually, I'm going to have to buy another one because I will say this. If you leave it open too long, it starts to dry up and kind of get this really weird cakey feel, which I knew that and I didn't take care of it. I just would paint with it open, but I recommend if you're taking ink out of this, put it on a little palette or put it on a plate that you don't really care about and use it from there. Don't use it directly from the little bottle. But this particular ink, the reason why I love it is I like to do little dot details, and if you use white watercolor or you use acrylic, sometimes the acrylic will create a little mountain like bead. If you like that, that's great. I like my illustrations to look more flat. So this particular thing, it stays together. So when I'm doing a dot, it will remain a dot, but it doesn't have that little mountain hill like acrylic would have. Another thing is when you're using watercolor white, sometimes the watercolor white will remain this really nice, perfectly sphere, round white dot. And then other times it will kind of spread out because watercolor, when it's coming in contact with wet paper, it will create this really weird, like just splatter kind of effect as you touch the paper. This particular ink is so thick that it almost always, I would say like 95% of the time, when I put a little dot on the paper, it's going to remain that nice small dot. And I like to use these just as small accents. So a lot of times if there's white fur on an animal, I will put little dots. Or for the deer, I actually used this as a highlight above its eye. I like how precise I can be with this particular brand, but yet it's really easy to work with. So that's a little tidbit. Anyway, it has been 40 minutes, y'all. So I do want to ask you, I'm thinking about doing live streams in the future, especially when weeks get really busy. So let me know in the comments, do you like this particular time, kind of like a Saturday afternoon, or do you maybe prefer a night? And if you prefer a night, do you prefer like a Friday night, or do you prefer a Saturday night? I know sometimes Saturday is the day when people go and they do fun stuff. But Friday night is sometimes like that too. And I want to kind of have, Steven helps me with the comments, so I'm not sorting through. So it's kind of a fluid stream. So he's only available usually on Fridays and Saturdays. So those are the only 2 days I can do this with him. And he's in the corner.
What's
So
the brand of opaque white you showed just now? The brand of opaque white that you just showed.
Oh, the brand is called Cobic. That's it, if you can see it. It's on Amazon. I can't remember how much it is. It's not that much. I've had this one for 2.5 years. And I need to buy another one. But let me know in the comments if this particular thing worked. And then I want you to like the video. I don't think you can do that now, but maybe later on. To give me an idea of, do you want me to do more? Actually, like the video if you want me to do watercolor supplies that I hate. Because I do have a good amount of things that I've tried over the years that I don't like. And I think that's always informational too. I don't want to be like super negative, but there are certain supplies that I just really don't like, and it's mainly because of my own particular style of how I paint with watercolor. So like the video if you really want to get an idea of brands that I don't like or supplies that I don't like for watercolor.
They can add comments, other comments later on.
Oh, another thing is you can add further questions and further comments on this video as it's going. Some of you might have come in late, and that would be a really good jumping off point for me for next time, just in case like I need some extra, like I created a little outline today of things that I could talk about, but also I wanted it to be a conversation with all of you. So I hope that's kind of how it felt to me, so you can kind of get an idea. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, and I'm actually going to go back to work because I have to finish a painting today and get that all ready to go. And yeah, that's going to be my afternoon. I'm going to be painting right over there, probably the remainder of the afternoon. So follow me on Instagram and Facebook if you kind of want to get cute little sneak peeks of what I'm painting. It is for a future video, so I can't show you the whole thing, but I'll give you.
Sign up for the newsletter.
Oh, and my husband is like, make sure you sign up for the newsletter because I do have some special things coming out soon, such as templates. But I've been kind of holding off because I really wanted to. Over the past month, I've been really trying to figure out how I want to pursue with Watercolor Misfit next. And I have a really good game plan, but of course that takes some planning and time. So if you want to be up on the newest of news, make sure to sign up for that newsletter because that's where I'm going to be telling you about future courses, which I have a very large course coming up. I've been working on that for a couple of months now, and it's about ready to go into film mode, and usually once I hit film mode, it's a really quick turnaround. So that is that, and I also have templates coming out if you want free templates.
Sign up where?
Steven's going to provide a link for where you need to sign up. So just wait for that real quick. But another thing I want to say is if I do free templates, like for Valentine's Day I did a free template, and for Christmas I did a free template. I'm going to have another template probably coming up very soon for a free template. So if you want to get free templates, I've really been using the newsletter to provide those recently, not as much the YouTube channel. However, there are some things coming up. You're definitely going to want to make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell for YouTube, because I do have some very special things coming soon on the YouTube channel that will be some nice little prizes and stuff like that.
There are some other free templates we can give them, like right now, actually.
If you want a free template, Steven's telling me right now.
Like, if you go to that watercolor video. The main one.
Okay. The 4 essentials. If you want a template right now and you haven't gotten it, there are some videos where I have templates available where you go to that video and then you go in the description box of that video. So like one of the videos is 4 essential things. It's probably my most popular video on my channel, but it's 4 essential watercolor skills every beginner needs to know. That one has Teddy in kind of that Payne's gray painting. That particular template is actually free. So if you would like to get that particular drawing, you just go to that video, go to the description box, and there's a link down there, and you can get that for free. Another one that is still free is Spooky Kitty. There was a Halloween one with a kitty cat inside of a wheelbarrow. That one is still free. That one's still available. So basically what I'm doing is anytime I really provide a free template on YouTube that I feel like is good for beginners to play around with, I will make that available for free. And those 2 I feel like were really good videos for beginners, and so I've just left those up for free. So that is it for this particular live stream. We have talked almost an hour now. I hope you enjoyed this. I really did. I really liked doing this. I can't wait to do this again. So, but yeah, I'll talk to you later, y'all, and have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful rest of your weekend. Lots of love, y'all. See you later. Bye. And we need to go to, stop streaming.